according to St. Luke, the 16th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
And then Jesus said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. And so he summoned him and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. And then the manager said to himself, what will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes. And so summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, how much do you owe my master? And he answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. And then he asked another, and how much do you owe? And he replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with a dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated, and let us pray. Father God in heaven, a lot of confusing words in Scripture today. And yet, Lord, you make very clear to us the bottom line. How are we living our life today? Who is our master? And who do we serve? Lord God, let us not only hear your questions of us today, but to answer those questions with the new framework of Jesus in all things that we do and say and the way we live. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Most commentaries and sermons about today's gospel, the parable of the unjust steward, either begin with quickly making the point that it is just a strange and difficult text. And sisters and brothers, it is a difficult text. It sometimes just doesn't make sense. A dishonest employee is commended by his boss. That's not how we want the world to be. That's not what we teach our children. That's not what we even expect Jesus to say or to encourage. So I want to begin somewhere else. I want to begin with something that, while not necessarily easier, it is a bit more understandable and familiar. Give me an accounting of your management, the master said to his manager. I think every one of us here this morning have heard those words in some form or context or another. It may not have been those exact words, but at some time in our lives, probably many times, an accounting has been demanded of us. The IRS invites us to bring our papers and account for the numbers on our tax return. And let me ask you this, have you ever been called to the principal's office? You sit down with a therapist or a pastor, and he or she says to you, so tell me about your life. What's going on, really? Or the boss man says he wants to see you in his office, and you come home, gosh, and your spouse speaks those four dreaded words. Honey, I think we need to have a talk. Each Sunday we come to this place in the liturgy when the pastor or the priest says, let us confess our sins against God and our neighbor. And in all those situations, an accounting of our management is being demanded of us. It's not easy. Giving an accounting can be uncomfortable. and even a fearful time. We review those words and actions wondering, what have I done? What have I left undone? And what will happen to me? What will I do? And no one likes to have to give an accounting. We're pretty private people when we come to discussing what is in the books of our lives. And not only do we not want to have others see the balance, sometimes we do not want to even see the balance. We do not want to face and deal with what is reality. But that's what the accounting in today's gospel is all about. You see, the accounting demanded of this manager, just like it once demanded of all of us, is really an accounting of his life. It asks us to open the books of our lives and examine, audit, and to answer, what are we doing with our life and who are we serving? It raises important questions. What are we doing with the resources, the assets, and the gifts entrusted to us on this earth? Think about all that we have, sisters and brothers. Time and money, ideas, dreams and hopes, questions and curiosities, people and relationships, passions and concerns, love and compassion and forgiveness, mercy, talents and abilities, so much. What if we were to give an accounting of our management of all these things? What would our books look like? What do they reveal about us? And where and how and in what ways and whom are we spending and investing these assets? These are not just questions to be answered individually. There is also a communal or corporate accounting of our management to be given. What would it look like for America to account for its management? What do the books and balances say about our national life here in the United States? What about globally and internationally? What do the world's books say about humanity? At every level, people are trying to serve two masters. And it just doesn't work. Look at what has happened in recent years. Killings have taken place in our shopping places, theaters, synagogues, churches, and our schools. Bombings have taken place even this last week in Saudi Arabia. And think about, even on the news yesterday, the man driving his SUV into a shopping mall outside in the suburbs of Chicago, almost hitting children and mowing them down like grass. Sisters and brothers, we can't go on like this. Something has to change. Today's gospel calls us to account for our management of all that we are and all that we have. And the demand for an accounting often sounds like someone's in trouble. And that's how today's parable begins. The manager has been charged with squandering his master's property. He's going to be fired. He's going to lose his job, his income, his reputation, his status. A part of him is dying. And at some level, he will lose his life as he now knows it to be. And whether we've lived it, heard it from a friend or colleague, or read it in the news, it's a familiar story to all of us. Somebody has been bad. They've been caught. And now they're going to get what they deserve. That's how the world works. That's what we expect. But sisters and brothers, that's not how the kingdom of God works. And you know, parables rarely give us what we expect anyway. So we ought not to be so quick to come to a final or definitive interpretation of this parable this morning. We cannot with ease or confidence declare who, if anyone in particular, each one of these characters represents, whether it be God, Jesus, or us. The parable offers ambiguity and tension, not in a neat resolution that feels like really the way our life really is. And maybe that's the story in general. And the manager in particular is simply a picture of that ambiguity and tension that we typically see. It is a picture that probably looks very familiar to most of us. A picture of tension and ambiguity in our own lives, our own struggles and our own decisions. There is even some ambiguity in labeling this man as a quote-unquote dishonest manager. What does that really mean, the dishonest manager? That is why I said earlier in the message, I would suggest not getting bogged down with the particulars in this difficult text for today, or even some of Jesus' words that sometimes sound like Jesus is making a connection between making friends with yourselves by means of dishonest wealth so that you're welcome into the eternal homes. Maybe the label of dishonest isn't what we think it is. Maybe it is less a declaration about the manager and more a description of his relationship with the manager. First, we have no details of what this man did or did not do, and not having any details of what he's charged with in terms of squandering, and how he was fired or whether the charges are even valid. And secondly, while the word that is translated dishonest can refer to a particular action or wrongdoing, it can also refer to the quality of unrighteousness. And in that sense, the manager's relationship with his master is not right. It's broken. It's impaired, out of sync. And perhaps the manager has chosen self-interest and self-loyalty and self-serving over interest in and loyalty to and service of the master. And that can quickly happen and easily happens for each one of us. This manager then is perhaps the face of Jesus' own words, you cannot serve two masters. In other words, when Jesus says, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, you may be welcome into your eternal homes, maybe Jesus is saying, when you make friends with or actually come to terms with your own unrighteousness, and finally it's gone, you get all that unrighteousness out of your body and your heart, then you'll be welcome into eternal homes. Well, since we don't know a lot about this guy in today's parable, or what he did, maybe we need to shift our focus. Instead of getting bogged down with making judgments in this parable by trying to audit this guy's books in our parable, maybe the real message that Jesus is trying to get across to us today is to examine our own books. Instead of being shocked that this dishonest manager is commended, maybe we can see precedent, hope, and possibilities for our own commendation by putting our own books in order before God and one another. And the point is, the accounting that should have been the manager's ruin, think about it, in today's story, it actually became a starting point for a new life, a starting point for new relationships, and a new home for this manager. He realized he could not serve two masters, God and wealth. Grace was hiding in the demand for an accountant, waiting to be discovered and claimed. And the accounting demanded of this manager was both an ending and a new beginning, a death and a resurrection. And so can it be for us as well. While the master may have wanted to audit the past numbers and transactions, the manager saw that his old life was empty, bankrupt. And new life would be seen only by looking forward. New life would be found only by being and doing and living differently. The manager claimed for himself the grace hidden in his master's demand for an accountant, and he was commended. And so if that can happen for this dishonest manager, so it can happen for us. Now here's another crazy idea that I share with you. This parable, no doubt, sends a strong message for all of us to become accountable, to get rid of our unrighteousness, confess our sin before God, and asking for forgiveness. But suppose the accounting that's asked of us is never completed by the time that we die. The books are never closed, and the bottom line is never tackled until Jesus comes again. What if that accounting is not about not only confessing our wrongdoing until life ends, but is more importantly about the new life that is to come? What if this whole parable actually is about grace rather than punishment? That certainly changes our usual understanding of an accounting. But that's what parables do. And that certainly changes the way we see and understand it. And maybe that's what Jesus is saying to you and me this morning. Yes, start taking stock. Start being accountable. But in the end, what I had in mind for you is not about punishment. It's about love and grace, forgiveness, and loving you forever, even to eternal life. Sisters and brothers, the accounting of our management of our lives is important, very important. But it's not just about numbers or wrongdoing or punishment, but it's about helping us see and orienting our lives to a new direction. God wants us to open our lives to seeing new possibilities and living life for the sake of Jesus and for one another. Allow me to close this morning with this short story. It's a powerful story, and I want you to listen carefully. There was a small town, and there was a rich man there who died, and he left a sizable estate. And one of his curious neighbors came up to the man's attorney and said, "Would you mind telling me how much he left?" And the attorney smiled and said, "I don't mind telling you at all. This man left everything he had. He left everything he had." Today, Jesus is asking each one of us sitting here in this church this morning, what are you doing with your life? Who are you serving? And while you still have time to answer those questions, with Jesus as your new frame of reference, you will not only start living your life when you become accountable to God and one another, but when you live your new life with Jesus as your new frame of reference, you will see your eternal home and rejoice on your Easter day when Jesus says to you, "Well done, O good and faithful servant." Amen. Let's stand, please. And may the peace of God which passes all human understanding keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus our Lord.